in bringing in some new folks. The unions liked his rhetoric on trade. Hispanics, people forget, are for the most part very socially conservative. I know that there's a lot of folks who think that the Democrats are trying to encourage illegal migration in order to sway the demographic structure of the voting blocks. That's bad math. Illegal migrants can't vote. And Hispanic Americans who are born here, second generation on, are far more likely to vote social conservative, AKA Republican, than Democrat. And then the Catholics kind of split down the middle, but half of them basically became evangelicals under Trump, my mother among them. This is today's Republican coalition. It is custom crafted to fight the culture war, and it can't find Canada on a map. This is your problem. The national security conservatives are no longer part of the political process. And I'm not saying that you have to choose to become Democrats or Republicans. I mean, we go through this kind of shakeup every 30 or 50 years or so. This is the 7th time we've done it. We'll get through it. I'm not worried about that. The process is ugly and it's loud because we're Americans, and this is how we are. But it does mean that here we are at the intersection of major secular and structural forces, turning the world into something we've alternatively never seen before, and maybe have seen a little bit in the distant past, making something fundamentally new. And the military is not part of the conversation. That's a difficult place to be. And you're trying to transform the force, and you're trying to recover and learn from 20 years of military occupations all at the same time. That's hard. In the business world, we call this bleh. Everyone is wrestling with some version of this right now, but very few groups have as much on the line as you do. So the challenge for you looking forward, with either the Biden administration or whatever ultimately displaces it, is to find a voice. And that is going to be difficult because there's something that Americans have refused to do since 1989 that now you need to do for us. We've refused to have an open, honest conversation with ourselves about what sort of world we want to see. And that's just left you guys flailing. Because if you don't know what the goal is, you don't know how to get there. So if you've got a vision, for God's sakes, talk about it, write it down, and present it to other people. I don't care who your political contexts are. Left, right, center, far left, far right, doesn't matter at this point. The United States today, while we're in this transitional period, they usually last 8 to 12 years, we're in year 6. While we are in this process, we cannot have a conversation in the civilian world about foreign policy that matters. We're too drowned out with the noises of the transition as the factions rise and fall and jump ship. You are the only community who can read a map. The business community is out. There are only actually 2 little parts of the business community that are internationalized. Agriculture, because our farmers are so productive, and Silicon Valley, because they outsourced the entire manufacturing base to East Asia. Silicon Valley has made itself irrelevant to this conversation because that all now has to move. And the farmers want to feed the world. They're going to try. They're going to fail, but they're going to try. That just leaves you. I don't have a solution here. We're living in the lightning. This is the greatest period of change we will experience in our lives. And the world on the other side of this is going to make the transition through World War II look like child's play. Let me give you a scenario of what will happen if we don't come up with a vision of the future. At the end of the Civil War, the United States was obviously split and couldn't take any strong positions on international trade or security issues beyond the continent because we didn't want to risk the reintegration process. Reconstruction was critical for us in many ways. As a result, the State Department, the Defense Department basically shut down all discussion of meaningful interactions with the outside world for 50 years. We got something called dollar diplomacy out of that, which meant that individual rich Americans or business interests or religious interests would go wherever they wanted in parts of the world that didn't have a large European presence and do whatever they wanted. And the result was hemispheric chaos, and among many, 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 many other things, the destruction of China as a functional power and its eventual fall to the communist system. I'd prefer to not do that again. That's the road we're on right now, because until our political transition completes, we've lost all guidance. So I can't tell you how to do your jobs. That would be a disaster. I can tell you that you are the only repository of functional information about how the world works in America right now. And if you can't provide discussion and leadership on that topic, it's not going to happen.
A really good amount of time walking out the economic factors, but I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about your views on the interrelationship between the other dime elements. Because I see this map that you put out in front of me, and I actually see it a little differently, I suppose. You know, I see some of the actors, China, for example, perhaps thinking, at least from a diplomatic perspective, that they have some answers to the questions or the problems that you put out here. I don't think if you talk to Beijing, they believe that economics are necessarily destiny. And I do believe that in some cases they think that they have some economic answers and perhaps a system that they think could reorder the world differently. So the reason I would be concerned about instability is perhaps more focused on the people end of things, the ability to act or the desire to act to shake this up so that economics would not become destiny. So I'd be just curious to hear about your take on how the four elements of national power would actually interrelate in this sense, if that makes sense.
Let me start by saying that it's not just economics. Economics itself is an outgrowth of demography and geography. The American geography has the greater Midwest, has the greater Mississippi system, lowest cost food production and transport system in the world, ocean moats, so any defense force that we are going to build is going to be primarily outward based rather than inwardly based. That's kind of the basis of American power from my point of view. China's the opposite. China's land is low quality. They don't have an internal transport system except for in regions that they're concerned are secessionist. And then they are surrounded by a belt of useless lands that they can't really patrol effectively. And because of the first island chain, they can't project power out except now when the United States has put everybody on the same side with globalization. So I see the overall geographic underpinnings of Chinese power being completely resting upon the United States nullifying their geographic disadvantages. And so the idea that if the Chinese think that they can move beyond economics as the basis for power, they really do have nothing left. I mean, the Chinese ethnicity, the Han, have been there for over 3,000 years, but they've only been able to be a united entity that is relatively secure in their borders for about 10% of that time, and half of that is under the American-led order. So if we remove economics from the equation, this ends a lot faster.